Hey, Future Medics. Today we are breaking down glycolysis. I know it's complicated, but we're going to make it easy. It's going to be fine. You're not alone. This one throws a lot of people off. So, we were talking about cellular respiration, and that's where we are in our physiology right now. And step one is glycolysis. So, to make glucose, sugar, that we get from food, right, and nourishment, into usable fuel for the cells, ATP, adenosine triphosphate, we have to break glucose down. But glucose actually has so much energy stored in its phosphate bonds that if we broke it down in just one step, we would lose most of it to heat and not actually get a whole lot of ATP from it. So, because of that, we tinker with it and change it and do chemical reactions and break it down slowly to get the max amount of ATP out of it. That's why this feels so complicated, but we're going to make it a little easier to understand. Glycolysis is the first step of cellular respiration, and it takes place in the cytoplasm. So the other steps are going to be in the mitochondria. This one is the cytoplasm of the cell, and it does not require any oxygen. So glycolysis is an anaerobic process, which is important because it means that it will still create some ATP for the body when our patient is in shock or in cardiac arrest. Here's how it will work. One molecule of glucose will enter the cell. It will go into the cytoplasm where we will use 2 ATP. Gotta spend money to make money. We're going to use 2 ATP to attach phosphate groups to the molecule of glucose. And that's going to do 3 things. It's going to keep the glucose from leaving the cell. It's going to keep glucose from building up and overrunning the cell. And it is going to destabilize that molecule of glucose so that we can further break it down to make ATP. So we have this one molecule of glucose, and through a series of chemical reactions, glycolysis is going to be able to break it into 2 molecules of pyruvate acid. As glucose is being broken down in this step, we also produce something called NADH. Think of this like a charged battery. It's not used that much in glycolysis, but it is going to be used later. And NADH will enter the mitochondria and drop off those charged electrons to be able to help make a large amount of ATP later. Okay? So by the end of glycolysis, we have 2 NADH, 2 pyruvate acid, and a net of 2 ATP. We actually produce 4, but remember this entire process took 2 to get started. So the cytoplasm will take the 4, keep 2 of them so it can run this process again. So we're only going to come out with a net of 2 ATP here. So now we're at a fork in the road point. And it solely depends on the availability of oxygen. If oxygen is available, aerobic, okay, is available, all of this from glycolysis will then move on its little conveyor belt into the mitochondria, and we'll get a huge ATP payoff. But if oxygen is not available, this is now anaerobic. Glycolysis is an anaerobic process, and it will never go past glycolysis. It will just stay here, and we'll only end up with 2 ATP made per glucose molecule. Super inefficient system. The other thing that happens is that pyruvate will turn into lactic acid, which can build up in the body. Super not great, right? Not helpful to the body in any way. The other thing is the cells will make NAD+ so that glycolysis can continue. So an anaerobic process like glycolysis is the body's backup power system. Think of it like a generator. Maybe you can't power the entire house, but the stuff in your fridge won't go bad, right? Maybe you can keep the lights on during a storm. That's exactly what an anaerobic process is. It'll give you a little bit of power, a little bit of ATP, not enough to really go anywhere with, but enough to keep you alive for a little while. And we see this when our patients are hypoxic for a long period of time. They're in shock. Maybe they were in cardiac arrest. They're in respiratory failure. This is where we see this happen because oxygen is not making its way to the cells. So when you're in the hospital and you hear a lactic acid value, it's not just a lab value, it's actually really important. And if those numbers are high, it tells us that the body is operating on this backup system because it is starving for oxygen. Understanding glycolysis helps you understand why perfusion matters so much in what we do. If if the body is solely relying on glycolysis and anaerobic activity, lactic acid is building up, we're not making enough ATP, and eventually cells are going to die. And when enough cells die, a patient might. So, whenever you are fixing airway, breathing, circulation, you're not just fixing the numbers on your monitor. You are actually, hopefully, helping the patient switch back over from anaerobic processes to aerobic respiration so they can start making large amounts of ATP and actually get better. So, glycolysis is fast, it's anaerobic, but it sets the stage for everything that's going to happen next. If it's the only power plant working in the body, it does not make enough energy. It was never supposed to. But it is an incredibly important transfer station for breaking things down so that everything later can work out in our favor. I told you I would make this to where you can understand it. I know you do. I know you're doing fine. I believe in you, and I'll see you soon for the next step.